निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशधारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवास आदि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे ओम ज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत् नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवतसेवया भगवतीरुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 5. And the text that we're going to start today is 47. So we've been asked to read from 47 to 51. So we'll start with 47. Aprameyanuභావోऽयम् अकुतश्चिद्भयो मरः नूनमेतद्विरोधेन मृत्युर्मे भविता न वा अप्रमेयानुभावोऽयम् अकुतश्चिद्भयो मरः नूनमेतद्विरोधेन मृत्युर्मे भविता न वा अप्रमेयानुभावोऽयम् अकुतश्चिद्भयो मरः नूनमेतद्विरोधेन मृत्युर्मे भविता न वा. The devotees would like to chant this verse.
Aprameyanuභావోऽयम् akutaśchit bhayo maraha nunam etad virodena mrityorme bhavita nava.
Anyone else? Okay. I'll read the word for word translation. Aprameya, unlimited. Anubhava, glory. I am this. Akutashchit bhaya, having no fear from any quarter. Amaraha, immortal. Nunam, definitely. Etat virodhena, because of going against him. Mrityu, death. Me, my. Bhavita, may be. Na, not. Va, or. And translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. I can see that this boy's strength is unlimited, for he has not feared any of my punishments. He appears immortal. Therefore, because of my enmity towards him, I shall die. Or maybe this will not take place. So this is the thinking of Hiranyakashipu after all the attempts to kill Prahlad Maharaj failed. As you read in the previous verses, he tried many quite he tried many ways to kill Prahlad Maharaj, and some of them were quite ghastly in terms of how he tried to kill him with poison and having him stomped by big elephants or being put in a pit of big snakes, thrown from a mountain, all sorts of things which are considered like really ghastly ways of trying to kill people. And he tried all of that on his own little son, his 5-year-old son, and he completely failed. And when he couldn't do that, he became scared. He said, "Well, this boy is like a dog's tail. No matter how long you keep it if you take a dog's tail and keep it in a pipe for 10 hours, and as soon as you take the pipe out, tube out, the dog's tail gets curved again." So that's a very common analogy in Sanskrit literature as well, where things that can never be rectified are compared to a dog's tail. It's always going to remain crooked. And so Hiranyakashipu uses the same metaphor and says, "This is like a dog's tail. You never can be straightened." And in this verse, he said specifically that he could see that the boy's strength is unlimited, and he has not feared any of my punishments. He appears immortal. And so there are a few points in this verse itself that I just want to quickly make. Then we read the other verses where uh, Hiranyakashipu acknowledges now that the boy's strength is unlimited, and he realizes that the strength of this boy cannot just be because of his own prowess, because he's just a 5-year-old boy. And Hiranyakashipu has no problem killing so many other individuals who are, in his estimation, way more powerful than this little boy. So he's kind of astonished how come this boy is not even disturbed. And the point that is in the translation that Srila Prabhupada makes is that he has not feared any of my punishment. So it's not only that he's unharmed. So that's one part of it, right? So one part is that he was unharmed, but he was also not fearful. So it's one thing to be unharmed, but you may still be fearful, right? So when all these punishments are meted out to you, the boy could still be very fearful, but still, because of Lord Krishna's grace, he's unharmed. But in this scenario, the boy was not just unharmed, but also not fearful. He had no fear of the demons and Hiranyakashipu. And so this abhaya, this akutaschit bhaya, so he didn't have any fear. Abhaya, this feeling of abhaya. Govinda Das, we know this song that Bhajore mana Srinanda Nandana Abhaya Charanaravindare. So this devotion to Lord Shri Krishna, this bhakti to Lord Shri Krishna gives us abhaya. And what is this abhaya? Abhaya is really, Srila Prabhupada comments in many other parts of Srimad Bhagavatam that he says the cause of bhaya or fear is just the anxiety of what may happen and lamentation for what has happened. The combination of anxiety and lamentation is what causes fear. Right? So you're fearful that something bad may happen, and you're lamenting that something bad already happened. That it could have happened this way, I could have done this, I could have done that, or I could have. And mostly in the material sense, people have this lamentation. So if you have a lamentation, uh, and from a spiritual perspective, that I could have better utilized my life, that is bona fide lamentation. Where even Srila Narottam Das Thakur sings that Hari Hari Vipule Janma Gawainam. He says, "Oh my Lord, I have uselessly wasted my life. Manusya Janma Paya Radha Krishna Bhajiya Janiya Shunya Vishakhainu." He says, I achieved human birth. Manusya Janma Paya. I achieved human birth. Radha Krishna Bhajiya. And I never worship Radha Krishna. Janiya Shunya. Knowingly, Vishakhainu. I consume poison. So this is the lamentation of Narottam Das Thakur. Of course, we understand that is his way of expressing his humility, not that Narottam Das Thakur had this specific issue. So we understand it as an expression of humility. But that kind of lamentation of not having sufficiently utilized our life in the worship of Radha Krishna is bona fide. But any other lamentation for material things, like I should have made so much more money, or I should have done so much more in terms of material achievements, is not considered bona fide. It's considered a sign of uh, just being materially afflicted. So in this scenario, we see that the Prahlad Maharaj was not at all fearful, and he also appears immortal. That's another point in this verse where, and if you just go back a couple of chapters, the whole exercise, the whole activity started with Hiranyakashipu wanting to become immortal. So now he sees it's come a full circle where he wanted to become immortal, he couldn't, and he got a whole bunch of benedictions from Brahma that he thought kind of made him immortal, but now he's seeing that his son, although he didn't specifically perform any austerities to Brahma or anybody else, apparently at least, and he's just a little boy, but he is seemingly immortal because all the things that Hiranyakashipu asked for, that I should not be killed by poisons or weapons and so on, all that seemed to be qualities that Prahlad Maharaj automatically already had, in spite of not performing any of those austerities that Hiranyakashipu performed. So there's some of the points that I wanted to just point out in this translation. We'll read a few more, and then there's a purport for a subsequent verse, which also I will read. So in text 48, and we will not, I think, chant all these verses. I will chant the verse. If anybody is inspired to chant these verses, you can chant. We will not read the word for word translation for each of these verses, so you can feel free to read it later on. The text 48. Iti tat chintaya kinchin Blanashriyam adhomukham Shandamarka Vaushanasau Vivikta iti ho chatuhu. Would anybody like to read this verse? 48.
Iti cha chintaya kinchin Malana Shriyam Hadomukam Chanda Markav Ashan Asau Vivikta iti Ochetohu.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Thinking in this way, the king of the Daityas, morose and bereft of bodily luster, remained silent with his face downward. Then Shanda and Amarka, the two sons of Shukracharya, spoke to him in secret. So simply the fact that he could not control his son was enough to drive this mighty Asura, this king of the demons, Hiranyakashipu, to moroseness and depression. Essentially, he was depressed. And he was bereft of bodily luster. Now, this personality was so strong and so powerful that even the Devatas, they were afraid of him. And so, just because he couldn't control his son, he was essentially driven to depression. And he lost bodily luster. And he remained silent with his face downward. So Shandanamarka came and spoke with him in secret. Of course, reason they spoke to him in secret is because he's still a very powerful personality. So they don't want to embarrass him in front of the whole assembly. So they privately came and spoke with him rather than make this discussion in the common assembly. So this is what they say to him in text 49. Jitam toike na jagat trayam bruvor vijrugmna trasta samasta dishnapam natasya chintyam tavanata chakshvahe navai shishunam gunadoshayopadam. I'll read it again. Jitam tavaikena jagattrayam bruvor vibhrung manatrasta dishnapam natasya chintyam tavanata chakshvahe navai shishunam gunadoshayopadam. Dr. Prabhu, would you like to read this verse?
I'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
Jitam Tvayaikena Jagat Trayam Bruvor Vijrimbana Trashta Samasta Dishnyapam Natasya Chintyam Davanata Jakshvahe Na Vai Shishnunam Guna Doshayopadam.
Translation by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. O Lord, we know that when you simply move your eyebrows, all the commanders of the various planets are most afraid. Without the help of any assistant, you have conquered all the three worlds. Therefore, we do not find any reason for you to be morose and full of anxiety. As for Prahlad, he is nothing but a child and cannot be the cause of anxiety. After all, his bad or good qualities have no value. So they're just speaking from I would say, practical point of view. So they're saying, my dear king, you're so powerful that even you move your eyebrows, the various devatas and the commanders of various planets, they come before you and they follow your order. It is said that Hiranyakashipu, all he had to do, if he wasn't happy with the temperature, it was too cold, because of whatever, winter or whatever, he would just raise his eyebrows, and the wind god, Vayu and others and Surya and others would just adjust the atmosphere such a way that it would become very pleasant. He didn't even have to say anything. He was so powerful that people were just afraid of him. Just the possibility of him becoming upset was enough to drive people to follow his order. So he was so powerful. And so they reminded him of that. They said, "You're so powerful. And we don't find any reason for you to be morose just because you couldn't control your son. He's just a child." And they say that, and this is a practical point that they make, that after all, his good or bad qualities have no value. In one sense, because if you think uh, a child cannot have uh, I'm talking about most common children, not about Prahlad Maharaj specifically, who was a great Mahabhagavata, regardless of his age. But when a child says something, and even if it's offensive, nobody takes it seriously. Right? If a child were to make a comment that would normally be considered not appropriate, then people just laugh, saying, "Oh yeah, the child. Look at the child. What the child said." Nobody takes it seriously. Nobody takes it as an offense. So the words of a child are not considered something that being taken seriously. And and moreover, the child's qualities will also evolve over time. So they're saying his qualities will evolve. Right now, you may not like some of the things that he's doing, but he will learn. And as he learns, he will become more and more uh, aligned with our way of thinking. Right now, he's so small, he doesn't know what is right, what is wrong. So he's just perhaps imitating things that you've seen or heard, but he may not really know. It's like if a child says something which is improper, we're not questioning the character of the child. We think, "I don't know where he heard this, and so let me just address the situation," as opposed to blaming the child. And that's typically how the word works. So Chanda Marka are saying the same thing. So saying, "Don't worry about this because he's just a child. And when he grows up and he's sufficiently mature, his personality will change. His personality will change." And so they continue, they say, "Imam tu pashair varunasya badbha निदेहि भीतो न पलायते यथा बुद्धिश्च पुंसो वयसार्य सेवया यावद् गुरुर्भार्गव आगमिष्यति." Translation: Until the return of our spiritual master Shukracharya, arrest this child with the ropes of Varuna, so he will not flee in fear. In any case, by the time he is somewhat grown up and has assimilated our instructions or served our spiritual master, he will change his intelligence. Thus, there need be no cause for anxiety. So now they're um, saying to Hiranyakashipu that let's just all calm down here a little bit. Right? We tried to kill him and we became totally, things got out of control. But yeah, so this can be controlled. He's just a boy. Let's just arrest him for now. And so that he doesn't run away, because why would he run away? Because we tried to kill him and do all sorts of things to him, so he might still be fearful and he might run away. And then once he runs away, we won't be able to change his mind. So let him just stay in our control and we will continue to instruct him. And by the time he's somewhat grown up, he will assimilate our instructions and he will serve our spiritual master Shukracharya and he will change his intelligence. So let's not worry about this. We'll give it another shot. He's still small, so maybe what we taught him he didn't really grasp. But as he grows up, his senses will also become stronger, and he'll become more attracted to materialistic things. And so this reminds me of how the four Kumaras, they remained as little children because they knew that the moment you grow up, all these things that are inherent in our consciousness due to contamination from lifetimes will awaken. Right. So when a small child, uh, he's in a scenario where let's say, and he sees a situation where uh, he's not moved by lust. It doesn't a small child of 2 or 3 years old, uh, he doesn't feel any pangs of lust or any of that. Whereas same child, when that child grows up to be 12, 14, 16 years old, and he sees the same situation, uh, then he might be the victim of lust, and all these different things start becoming manifest in that person's personality. So it's not like these things came from the outside. They are inherent in our consciousness because of our past conditioning and our past lives and so on. And so when we fan those kind of mentalities and visions and inputs, those kind of undesirable qualities start manifesting and becoming more apparent in our life. And so the the teacher Shandanamarka are saying that, well, since he's a child, none of his innate tendencies have become manifest. Now they don't understand that Prahlad Maharaj is a Mahabhagavata. And unlike them, he's not going to be subjected to these kind of feelings. But they're thinking about how they themselves conducted their lives, and so they're saying, well, as he grows up, then some of these other grosser ideas will start becoming more prominent, right? And we see that in our children as well. When they're very little, and as devotee children, they almost like saintly like Prahlad. But as they grow up, then they get other influences, and then it becomes harder. And then because of their pious credits in the past from past lives or whatever, at some point they become devotees again and become more fixed in devotional service. But there's a point between the ages of say 8 and 20 or whatever when they start getting influenced by so many other things. So that's the kind of similar instruction that Chandamarka are giving the king. And then this is the last verse we will read. There's a purport as well, where now they say, text 51, Tateti Guru Putroktam Anugyayedamabravit Dharmo Yasyopadeshtavyo Ragyam Yo Gruhamedhinam. Tarka Prabhuji, would you like to read this verse?
Tateti Guru Putro Tateti Guru Putroktam Agayedam Abravit Dharmo Yaso Padeshtavyo Ragyam Yo Grihamedinam.
Yeah, so Guru Putroktam means spoken by the Guru Putra. Guru Putra means sons of the Guru, Shakracharya's sons, Shandanamarka. So after hearing these instructions of Shandanamarka, the sons of the spiritual master, Hiranyakashipu agreed and requested them to instruct Prahlad in that system of occupational duty which is followed by royal householder families. Dharmo yapopadeshtavyo. So the dharma which is specific to royal households. Grihamedinam. Those are interested in householder life. Yeah. This verse Srila Prabhupada would quote all the time in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Shrotavyadini Rajendra Nranam Santi Sahasra Saha Apashyatam Atatatvam Gruheshu Gruhamedinam. That for those who are mentally engrossed, there are thousands and thousands of topics for hearing. And so he would quote this verse all the time where for Grihamedis, and he would distinguish between what a Grihamedi is and a Grihastha is. And Srila Prabhupada focuses on those points in the purport as well here. I'll read the purport. Hiranyakashipu wanted Prahlad Maharaj to be trained as a diplomatic king in ruling the kingdom, the country, or the world, but not to be advised about renunciation or the renounced order of life. The word dharma here does not refer to some religious faith. As clearly stated, dharmo hi asyopadeshtavyo rajanyo grahamedinam. There are two kinds of royal families, one whose members are simply attached to household life, and other consisting of rajarshis, the kings who govern with ruling power but are as good as saints. So if you read in the fourth canto, the whole character of Prithu Maharaj is explained in great detail. So he was a rajarshi, he was a king, but then he was Shakti Avish avatar of the Lord. He was a empowered incarnation, but he was still a living entity, and his whole life was conducted such a way that it was focused on spiritual life. Ambarish Maharaj and many other great kings that are described in the Srimad Bhagavatam are Rajarshis, who although were royal kings, Yudhishthira Maharaj His glories are explained in great detail. Same with Parikshit Maharaj. His glories are explained in the first canto, how glorious he was. So these were Rajarshis who were saints, although they were in royal families. But that is not the kind of person that Hiranyakashipu wants Prahlad to become. Uh, Prahlad Maharaj wanted to become a Rajarshi, whereas Hiranyakashipu wanted him to become a king attached to sense enjoyment. Grihamedinam. Therefore, the Aryan system, there is Varnashram Dharma, by which everyone should be educated according to his position in society's division of Varna, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, and Ashrama, Brahmacharya, Grahastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyas. So this whole concept of Daivi Varnashram, which is the four divisions of the Varnas, the Brahmanas or the intelligent class, the Kshatriyas or the administrative and the ruling class, the Vaishyas or the business and agricultural class, and Shudras, the service class. Srila Prabhupada says many times in the purports, also in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where this is discussed in great detail, and also in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, where this is discussed in several chapters, specifically in the 18 chapters is discussed in the previous chapters as well. This concept of the divisions of society to the intelligent class and the administrative class, the business class, and the worker class is prevalent in every civilized society. You may not call it those names, but every society has to be divided in this way. Only way that way the society can function. There has to be a group of, even in a company that you run a company, and I work in a you still have people who are the intellectuals who can do research and figure out what the right answer is. So you still have to have people who can run the company. You still have to have people who can sell and collect money and manage the money, and then you still have to have people who can do the work in the factory. So this is just a common way that every society is divided. So Srila Prabhupada emphasizes that this is not some kind of artificial structure that has been imposed. It is the way that any civilized society is divided. And over time, some of this becomes perverted into a caste system, but that is not what Devi Varnashrama is. So it's not confuse the caste system, which is a perverted reflection and more of a sociological construct than what Devi Varnashrama is. And then the four ashramas, which are brahmacharya, student life, celibate student life, and the emphasis is on the celibate part, both in terms of the mind and also the body, celibacy. Grihastha, where there is some license for sense gratification, and Vanaprastha, when it's retired life, and then sannyasa, where it's complete renunciation. So this is how society, Daivi Varnashrama society is divided. And Srila Prabhupada talks about it at length. And the reason why it's important to understand Daivi Varnashrama is that it's not like only the Brahmanas can become devotees of the Lord, or only the Kshatriyas can become devotees of the Lord, or the Shudras and Vaishyas are not allowed to be devotees of the Lord. There is no such restriction. And similarly with the ashrama, it's not like only the brahmacharis and the sannyasis can be devotees of the Lord. It's very clearly emphasized in the Shastra over and over and over again that any of these varnas and any of these ashramas have equal opportunity to become a devotee of the Lord and execute their devotional service and get perfection in their devotional service. So there is no such restriction that only certain varnas and ashramas can become devotees of the Lord. And these are also not defined by birth. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Chatur Varnam Maya Srishtam Guna Karma Vibhagashaha. So these four divisions of Varna and Ashrama are created by me according to Guna and Karma, according to the qualities one has acquired and activities one performs. There's no mention of Janma or birth in this whole context. So of course, Devi Varnashrama itself is a whole big topic that you can speak for hours and hours and hours on. And the reason why it's important is because for us to be able to understand and execute our devotional service well, we have to understand what are the qualities that are driving us, and then we can engage ourselves accordingly. Anyway, I'll continue the purport. A devotee purified by devotional service is always in the transcendental position above mundane qualities. Thus, the difference between Prahlad Maharaj and Hiranyakashipu was that Hiranyakashipu wanted to keep Prahlad in mundane attachment, whereas Prahlad was above the modes of material nature. As long as one is under the control of the material nature, his occupational duty is different from that of a person not under such control. One's real dharma or occupation duty is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Dharma su sakshat bhagavat pranitam. This comes in the fifth canto, which is discussed by this verse is spoken by Yamraj, that uh, dharma can only be established with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Srila Prabhupada mentions the real dharma is described as Bhagavatam. This is specifically discussed in the first canto, second chapter, verse 6, which says, Savai pumsam paro dharmo yato bhaktir adhokshaje haituki apratiyata yayatma suprasidati. So in this verse, uh, Sutta Goswami is saying that the highest dharma, Savai pumsam paro dharmo, so among all people in general, the highest dharma, paro dharma, is yato bhaktir adhokshaje, is performing bhakti or devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Adhokshaja, who's beyond our material senses. And how should this bhakti be performed? Ahituki, without any motivation, apratihata, without interruption, yayatma suprasidati. And that is the only kind of devotional service that can truly satisfy the soul. So that is the highest dharma. So that is what Srila Prabhupada is mentioning here, that the highest dharma is mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam. As described by his order carriers by Dharmaraj or Yamaraj, a living entity is a spiritual identity, and therefore his occupational duty is also spiritual. One must give up one's material occupational duties just as one must give up the material body. Whatever one's occupational duty, even according to Varnashram system, one must give it up and engage in one's spiritual function. One's real dharma or occupational duty is explained by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Jivera Swarupohai Krishnera Nityadas. So that's our ultimate identity, that we are ultimately servants of Krishna. So then if that is our real identity, then our dharma also has to be according to that. Right? Just like if you in our day-to-day function, we have so many different roles that we play. We may have to work in an office or milk cows or whatever service we have, then our specific responsibilities according to that specific function that we've taken on. So similarly, if our eternal function is to be the servant of Krishna, then our eternal duty or eternal dharma has to be aligned with that specific designation of servant of Krishna. So whatever we do ultimately has to be aligned with that, and that's really the point. So Srila Prabhupada concludes by saying, every living being is an eternal servant of Krishna. That is one's real occupational duty. So to summarize quickly, Hiranyakashipu was upset that he couldn't control his son, and so Shandanamarka pacified him, saying that, no, don't worry about this. We will, as he grows up, we will control him. We will train him more, and he'll become more aligned with our way of thinking. So Hiranyakashipu agrees and says, okay, why don't you go and teach him to become a Guru Medi? And Srila Prabhupada, in the purport, he very clearly speaks about understanding what Varnashrama is and understanding that we are not, the goal of Varnashrama is not to increase our material opulence or material consciousness. The goal of Varnashrama is to become Krishna conscious. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, in the first canto, second chapter, Sutta Goswami says, Ata pumbhi jizasreshta varnashrama vibhagasha swanishtitasya dharmasya samsiddhir haritoshanam. So the goal of varnashrama is haritoshanam. Hari is Supreme Lord Shri Krishna himself, and toshanam is the root word of the Sanskrit word santosha, which means to become pleased. So the goal of human life is to please Supreme Lord Hari. And the purpose of executing Varnashrama Dharma is to please Lord Hari, and not to become a Grahamedi and enjoy opulence and sense gratification. And that's really the sum and substance of the purport that Srila Prabhupada mentions. There are too many points that I made. I apologize because there's too many verses, and I was asked to cover a lot of verses, and there are too many points that are made in the verse and also in the purport. So I just wanted to quickly touch on them so we don't miss those points. But if there are any further discussion anybody would like to have, or make any comments or any questions, you can do that now. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for a blitz of just transcendental discussion. And yeah, I really appreciated the point about constructive lamentation. So with regards to that, what is not to be lamented about? We often see, at least I experience, is the I guess politicization around Varna, right? So in modern society, being a Sudra, um, it's actually being a good Sudra, you actually get a lot of rewards. But then you come to Krishna consciousness, and then you understand that modern day society is just completely opposite. What is praiseworthy is actually looked down upon in the Shastras. So we get acculturated to the fact that Sudra is actually a low position, and so we should go for a high position. So how does one just be at peace with that? Okay, I'm functioning as a Shudra in society, and also even in ISKCON sometimes we're working. Sometimes we may actually be serving in the position of a Shudra. So how do you actually make peace with that? That it's actually okay, even though one's false ego is resisting it and says, no, no, no. I was born a Sudra. I don't want to die as a Sudra.
Thank you for the question, Hare Krishna Prabhu. And so this is going to require a little bit of discussion and understanding of Varnashrama at a deeper level. So I'll try to explain it at a summary level, and then of course we can discuss, because like I said, the topic of Varnashrama, Devi Varnashrama, we can discuss for hours. And there's a lot of discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam as well. But the concept of Devi Varnashrama, it all starts with understanding how the modes of material nature work. That is the fundamental that we have to understand. In the 14th chapter of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains that in about 30 or so verses. But this whole concept of this three modes of material nature is really the foundation of understanding Varnashrama. And so we have to understand what modes of nature are driving us. So I'll give you an example rather than go into philosophy. I'll give you an example. Not everybody is innately inclined to study Shastra. But that doesn't mean that they cannot become devotees of the Lord. Right? So a person who learned Shastra and teaches Shastra may be an intellectual, but may not be a devotee. In fact, my personal example, my personal experience, or not example, personal experience is that too much intellectualization of the Shastra actually becomes a barrier to opening your heart to become a devotee. Because everything has to come through the intelligence. So your heart stops being the primary thing and intelligence becomes the primary thing. But end of the day, love for Krishna has to be with the heart, not with the intelligence. So when you love Krishna, it has to come from the heart. And I've seen devotees who are not so much into the delineation of Shastra and various aspects of what the Tattva Sandarbha said, but then they have just pure love for Krishna. I've seen it among so many simple-hearted devotees who have unflinching faith in the Lord and have deep love for Krishna inherently. But they may not be able to explain to you which specific canto in the Srimad Bhagavatam, what point is made, and they may not be able to have any kind of intellectual discussion with you. But their devotion to Lord Sri Krishna far surpasses anything that I can ever imagine to have in this lifetime. So I've seen from personal experience that there are individuals who are vastly devoted to the Lord, who have great devotion to the Lord, but are simple people in terms of not being able to understand Shastra or explain Shastra, right? So the understanding that your intellectual capacity or your Your intellectual inclination has nothing to do with how much bhakti you can have for the Lord. And so this understanding that this bhakti is causeless, when Srila Prabhupada uses this phrase over and over again, it's a very, very heavily loaded phrase. We just use it very simply, that causeless devotion, causeless bhakti, causeless mercy. But we actually have to understand what that means. That bhakti is not caused by anything. Bhakti is not caused by our intelligence. Bhakti is not caused by our activities. Bhakti does not have any cause. And in this book by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, uh, Madhure Kadimbini, he goes into quite a bit of detail in terms of how bhakti is causeless. Again, I don't want to make it the whole intellectual discussion, which essentially is a barrier to bhakti. That is my understanding after like studying Shastra for so many years, and Sanskrit linguistics and everything. It just becomes a barrier to bhakti. Yeah. And the reason why we need this is because our intelligence requires us to be convinced. But someone who's already convinced that they need to love Krishna, they don't need that logic. To give you a very mundane example, right? A person may do a DNA test to find out who their father is, right? And then be intellectually convinced. But another person may not even need that. They just inherently realize this is my father and have great love for that person. So, and if you go and tell that person, okay, I've done a DNA test and proved this is your father, that's not going to increase that person's love for that father in any way. It's just like a distraction. So I view this intellectual understanding of who's Krishna and all that is more of a distraction once you start performing bhakti. Mother Yashoda never cared that this was a supreme personality of Godhead or how he was God. That was not something that she even worried about. She wasn't waking up and performing arati ceremony for her son. She was running behind him to tie him up and chastise him. That was her mood. She was not like thinking I should offer obeisances to him. No, that was not her mood at all. Nanda Maharaj would ask Krishna to bring his slippers. Go bring my slippers. And Krishna would bring his slippers. And that was the mood. The cowherd boys didn't really feel, oh, this is the Supreme Lord. They would jump on him. And they would make Krishna carry them on their back. And they would wrestle with him. In fact, when Sridama saw Krishna wrestle with Kamsa and kill him, Sridama thought, what's the big deal? And I wrestle Krishna all the time and defeat him. So if he defeated Kamsa, I could defeat Kamsa pretty easily too. And that's what Sudama thought. He wasn't awed by, oh wow, Krishna killed Kamsa. He thought, hey, if Krishna can do it, I can definitely do it too, because I'm stronger than him. I defeated him all the time when we played. Right? So it's a very different understanding. So back to your question, that we have to first understand what drives us. A person who's inherently Brahmanical in terms of, when a person has Brahmanical tendencies, then the Brahmanical tendencies are focused on pursuit for truth. It's not focused on what anybody validates you or not. A person with Brahmanical tendencies is happy worshiping the deities all alone, even if nobody ever sees him do it or cares about doing it. A Kshatriya's tendency is focused on pursuit of justice. They cannot handle injustice. And even if it's at great personal cost, they will go against and fight against injustice. Vaishya's is driven by increasing of opulence, and it can all be used to the service of Krishna, because for running any kind of movement, you still need to collect funds, you still need to be able to do all of that, you still need service, you still need somebody to have intellectual understanding. So all these things can be used equally in the service of Krishna. So the idea of fulfillment should not come from what specific varna you are practicing bhakti in, but how are you developing a connection with Krishna, and how is that pleasing Krishna? That has got nothing to do with what varna. It's not like you can only please Krishna if you're in the Brahmana varna, and you cannot please. I mean, if you sweep the floor of the temple, then that is, in one sense, you can say it's a Shudra activity, whereas worshipping the deity in the temple is a Brahmana activity. But are we saying that Radha Damodar is more pleased by the person who's offering the lamp versus the person who's sweeping the floor? Absolutely not. That is not the case at all. Right? A person who's worshiping the deity in the temple might think that, oh, I'm such a wonderful pujari, and the other people are not able to worship the deity. And that mentality itself will drag him down to a point where he's way the back of the line when it comes to Krishna compared to the person who's humbly sweeping the floor and nobody even pays attention to that person. So we have to, so the whole idea of the paradigm has to shift in terms of understanding what is Krishna's perspective as opposed to what is our perspective. When we do that, then we can easily answer the question you asked specifically, that how do you be satisfied in the varna that you're in to serve Krishna? Because you have to look at it from Krishna's perspective. That's the only perspective that matters. Our perspective doesn't matter, right? So you may change your perspective, you may not change your perspective. End of the day, our perspective is irrelevant. The only perspective that matters is what is Krishna's perspective. And Krishna's perspective is that if you offer me love, I'll reciprocate with love. So it is not so much which varna we should aspire for, but the question is, how can we develop love for Krishna? Srila Prabhupada's purports all over the place, although he mentions that we're creating a society of Brahmanas and all that is because a society at large requires Brahmanas to provide guidance. But on an individual level, instructions of Srila Prabhupada are always to become a devotee of Krishna, chant holy name, and so on. That has got nothing to do with getting to a different varna. It is about developing love in our heart for Krishna. So that is the, I know it's a very vast topic, and I probably answered in a very quick way, but that's the fundamental point. That Krishna's perspective is what matters, not so much what our perspective is. I don't know if that answers your question. I'm happy to discuss offline as well.
That's a great answer, Prabhu. Thank you. Very satisfying to the heart. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Anything else anybody would like to comment on or say at this point? Dr. Prabhuji, anything from you? Any words of encouragement or wisdom from you?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, I want to thank you for a very nice class. I always enjoy hearing from you. I have lots of wonderful comments to contribute. Always very strictly in line with Srila Prabhupada's Siddhanta. I appreciate that very much. Don't really have any particular comments or questions, but I do want to express my appreciation for your classes. I like them very much.
Thank you for your blessings, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. If there's nothing else, we can end here. Thank you. Hare Krishna.